So Anahita, thank you for taking some time to join us. This is a fairly new issue that's come up, just in the last couple of weeks. So as many of you, may already know, IIUSA Invest in the USA, the industry trade organization that represents many regional centers, filed a lawsuit to invalidate the 2-year risk period policy that was published in October of 2023 on USCIS's website. And they also, at the same time, proposed a new minimum fixed 5-year investment sustainment period, which is not tied to the conditional residency period. So what happened here? Why was this done? And what potential impacts to investors do these two new actions potentially have? Obviously, they haven't been successful yet, but now they're on the table. And so how do investors, evaluating projects now, need to kind of consider, if these may be successful or not?
Yeah, I think this is a very timely topic, Sam, and I don't want to side with any side, but when it comes to IIUSA's lawsuit, definitely multiple regional centers funded it believing that the 2-year requirement was just not feasible. What I mean by that is any real estate project, whether that's building an apartment complex or single family homes, it is very difficult to finish that project in 2 years and get the money out and be profitable. That, I believe that regional centers believe, is a very tall order. And so what ended up happening just in reality on the market, we ended up seeing projects that were promising repayments in 2 years. But if you dig into the fine print of those offerings, you would see that several conditions would have to be met in order for those repayments to happen. So I think this lawsuit was incentivized because bigger regional centers that had like 7, 8, 9 years were unhappy with the 2-year rule, and the smaller projects that were offering repayments in 2 years were winning out. So I think there are two possible scenarios here. One is, the lawsuit was put into place to reverse the 2-year rule, which basically, if that is granted, what it does is it reverts back to the original rule. The original rule was the investor is unable to get any of their investment out until the 829 is filed, right? So if you've invested with EB-5 you got your I-526E approved, you're all done, you have your conditional green card, and you're in Boynton and you're subject to you're getting your money back, the project is successful, you've gotten your money back. You can get your money back under current rules, even if you haven't filed for 829. However, if this lawsuit was to reverse that requirement and go back to the old requirement, then EB-5 would be forced to wait until the 829 is filed, and you produce that conditional 829 removal of condition receipt, then pay you out. If those rules are not followed, if EB-5 or any of the regional centers pays you before the 829 is filed, and if this lawsuit, reverses the October 2023 sustainment policy, your immigration is bust. The reason we bring this up is we really want the investors to understand that when they're looking for a project, not only to look at the term, but most offering documents or site letters will state, we will repay the money, for example, in 3 years or in compliance with current immigration rules. If an investor is to get lured by that 3-year repayment and not read the following sentence, which states, we will have to comply with the rules, you pick a project just based on that 3-year investment, the client assumes the risk that the money isn't going to come back in 3 years because now the law doesn't permit them to get that money back in 3 years. If they're paid back in 3 years, now their EB-5 is invalid. They're not going to be able to lift conditions. So I think it's very important to understand, if this lawsuit is reversed, clients that have invested in shorter term projects that are promising returns in 2 to 3 years, are not going to be able to get their money back until the 829 is filed. Sam, do you want to add anything?
Yep, that's exactly right. It's basically, unfortunately, introducing a new element of uncertainty, which is how long does my money actually need to be invested before I'm eligible to get it back and not have a negative consequence to my pending immigration, right? So right now on the government's website, it says 2 years of investment, that's it. This lawsuit is saying, no, that was improperly done. It should be 2 years of temporary green card, which means you have to add on the time it takes to get the temporary green card to that minimum investment period. And then at the same time, this second proposed 5-year rule is saying, not only do we want the 2-year October 23 policy reversed, but we want to propose a new fixed 5-year policy, which isn't tied to the green card at all, and see if we can get that to be approved. And so, while that is, a little bit frustrating and does create some uncertainty for investors, we've got to kind of break things down and, put together a framework for how investors can evaluate different projects, right? So, now that we know that the lawsuit is out there, there's also this proposed rule, there's basically 3 possible outcomes. And so based on whichever outcome ends up becoming true, that kind of dictates, well, which type of a project, should you be looking for that will, give you the money back as quickly as you can, but also, taking into account which of these possible outcomes, could happen. And so Anahita, looking at these different sustainment periods, from an immigration, from a conservative perspective, what are the criteria for a project that, would kind of increase the likelihood of money being able to stay in just the one project and then come back without having to be redeployed or moved around, to more than one project?
Yeah, I think what we are telling our clients right now is just mentally to be prepared that the money's going to lock in for 5 years, regardless of what the project says. And after that, after they're mentally prepared for that 5-year lock-in period, and we're getting the 5-year number from the IIUSA lawsuit, assuming that happens, that's the best case scenario, right? The worst case scenario is it's tied to your 8 to 9, which now is going to be a longer time period. But best case scenario, assume it's going to be 5 years. And what's important to understand is what stage project are you investing in? Are you investing in a project that's at its tail end, which is about to complete construction in 3, 4, 6, 8 months? What happens to your money after that point? If clients are looking at investing in projects that are at the tail end, they need to understand what the redeployment policy is. And that redeployment policy and the rights around the redeployment policy should then impact their decision on where they should be investing. In terms of like clients' financial insecurities, we never tell a client where to invest, but we have had a lot of questions about, I have done due diligence on project A. I know project A is great, but how am I going to know where it's going to be redeployed and whether project B is going to be just as great? And to which we say, well, there is a way to avoid redeployment. And the way you do that is you go into a not super early, but like a mid-stage project. Let's just use Twin Lakes, for example. Twin Lakes is still going to be 5 years to finish the project, right? If you're in that project, you understand that 5, 6 years, the project's going to be ongoing. It's not going to finish and then repay your money or take that money out and redeploy it at the end of third year. So I think it's important that clients understand how much time is left in that project, have the conversation with the regional center about what the expected date of completion of the project is. And if for some reason we were to revert to the old rule, which is the 829 filing rule, what are the guardrails around redeployment? Where is the project? Most projects are not going to be able to tell you where that redeployment is going to happen. That's just not possible. But understanding, what the policy is, what the term of the loan will be, how that entire process is going to work is important. And I think, Sam, just in general, because the lock-in period used to be super long, there are a lot of players on the market that have been promising 2 to 3 year returns. And I think before the lawsuit, clients were just using that as a factor to make the determination into where to invest. I think this lawsuit has changed things. I think clients have started to understand that if all else is equal, everything's going to be at risk for 5 years. We then need to look at immigration risk. We need to look at the fundamentals of the project. We need to look at the capital stack of the project. We need to look at who the developer is. We need to look at the regional center's track record. We cannot just rely on, hey, I'm going to get repaid in 2 years and call it a day.
And I think looking at these 3 different rows on this chart, row number 1, that's obviously the old rule, the 2-year conditional residency period. That timing of when you're going to be eligible to be repaid is tied to your temporary green card, right? So how quickly you get it and then hold it for that 2-year period, that's going to determine when you're eligible. Whereas number 2 and 3, those are just minimum investments from the beginning. So once your money goes in, regardless of how long it takes to get the temporary green card, you're still going to be eligible for repayment after either 2 or 5 years. And so because we don't know which of these 3 policies will actually apply to you as an investor, the way to kind of minimize your risk, particularly related to number 1, is get the green card as quickly as you can, right? And so by selecting a rural project, you get the green card process on a priority basis. You have access to the set aside with 20% of the visas. So it's much more likely you're going to get the green card faster. And so, if the lawsuit is successful and the 5-year proposed rule is not, then we revert to number 1, the 2-year conditional residency period. And that's where you've got to get the green card and hold it for 2 years before you're eligible to get the money back. And so, that's where the difference between picking a rural project or picking an urban project, particularly as an Indian or Chinese born client, where that difference could be 4 or 5 more years for the urban, that's where there's going to be a big difference. And so, we just don't know which of the 3 will apply. And so you've got to just kind of decide, what level of risk, with respect to investment term, and with investment term comes the redeployment risk, are you willing to accept? Obviously, if you want to be conservative, the best project to pick is one that lasts at least 5 years and is rural, because then no matter which of these 3 happens, your money is, very likely going to be able to just remain in that first project. Whereas if you pick something shorter that's urban, there's a very high risk that, you're going to need to be redeployed, and it could be a result of, money being invested for a lot longer than even 5 years in total.
Correct.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Anahita, for taking some time to share your thoughts on this. This is definitely a new, ongoing issue that is really important, that investors need to be aware of, and I know is one that clients are often asking you about. So yeah, thank you for taking time to join us and share your thoughts on this.
And the one thing I will say is, for my Twin Lakes clients that have asked me this question, it doesn't matter. Twin Lakes, again, like I said, is a mid-cycle project. It's not going to impact when you're going to get your money back. This is not going to be impacted because it's a mid-stage project. It's going to take 5 to 7 years, which aligns with the term and the recommendation that you have provided. Similarly for Keystone or Wahali, I have clients in there. I've gotten a ton of questions if that's going to change anything, and my answer is the same to all. It doesn't change anything, because to begin with, EB-5 AN has had a conservative policy on these things.
Exactly. Yep. All right. Perfect.